Mike, let me start with you. Your reaction to the news and to the people, the leftists all over X with their dramatic, this is about the First Amendment, President Trump has crossed a new line, this is an infringement, and so on.
Yeah, journalists do not have the First Amendment right to violate federal law. And that is exactly what Don Lemon and his co-conspirators did here. When they stormed a Christian church during the middle of the service, Don Lemon went up to the pulpit to obstruct the service and debate the pastor during the middle of his service. They terrified the parishioners, including little children. As you said, Megyn, a woman fell and broke her arm. This is textbook Facebook or Face Act violation. This is textbook Klan Act violation under 18 U.S.C. Section 248 and 18 U.S.C. Section 241. And these Democrats who are wailing about this today are very familiar with these charges because the Biden Justice Department under Merrick Garland and Lisa Monaco and Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clark used both of those charges to go after elderly Christians who trespassed and prayed in abortion centers. So if you're going to use the FACE Act to go after elderly Christians in abortion centers, you can certainly use it to go after Don Lemon and his fellow modern-day Klansmen who are terrorizing white Christian churches on purpose.
That's the thing, Bill. If Don Lemon, or Megyn Kelly for that matter, just trespassed into an abortion clinic, or let's say, no, into a Rite Aid. Okay, let's pick that. It was closed, but somebody opened it, like somebody was burglarizing it, and we walked in without permission. We could be cited for trespass as journalists, but that'd probably be it. We wouldn't be charged for burglarizing necessarily, but they crossed into a facility that has an extra layer of protection. And like he messed with the wrong Marine, to quote Colonel Jessup. And that Marine in this case was a bunch of parishioners trying to worship, and which makes a big difference under the law for Don Lemon.
Well, of course. And thank you for having me on, Megyn. I'm a longtime fan. Mike and I know each other well. The
Awesome.
First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. Journalists typically or generally can avoid prosecution based upon the Department of Justice's forbearance and tolerance for some journalistic activity that might otherwise be in violation of, the strict language of a statute. The FACE Act, however, provides no journalistic exception. If the conduct of a journalist violates the text of the FACE Act, or Section 241, the conspiracy against rights. The First Amendment provides no protection. The First Amendment is in effect at its core a constitutional right to prevent the government from banning publication of information. It's not a fail-safe. It's not a provision that protects the actions of journalists in pursuing information. And that's what we have here. And in fact, Mike mentioned the use of the FACE Act by the Biden administration, Biden Justice Department, Merrick Garland. There were multiple conservative journalists prosecuted in connection with January 6th. I represented one of them. And they were there recording the events, video, audio recording. They defended themselves on the basis that they were just observers of the events. But, in their background, in their history, or even on that day, they made comments that the courts view sympathetic to something like that. The comments that were sympathetic to the protesters, and on that basis, correct, expressions of First Amendment opinion. And the court viewed that sympathy with the protesters as, setting them apart from other journalists. I represent one of them, Steve Baker, who now works for Glenn Beck and Blaze. We made a motion to dismiss the case against him on the basis of selective prosecution. We identified 60 credentialed and freelance journalists who had not been prosecuted, whereas Steve was singled out and prosecuted. And Judge Cooper in D.C. focused on some of Steve's commentary during the event and after the event and said, well, you really were, your comments express an intention to sort of go along and be part of the protest. Well, I got to tell you, I'm watching the video you're showing, and a lot of that I had not seen before. And I'm just chuckling to myself, thinking back to my 21 years as a prosecutor and 90 trials and thinking, he can't get on the stand. He can't get on the stand and defend himself because he's going to have to eat all these words in front of a jury. And plus what we don't know yet, which I think we will see maybe in the indictment today, and certainly we'll see it in the weeks ahead, is all the communications that the government now has their hands on. Emails, text messages, other kinds of communications, not on video as he did, but just his back and forth before and after the event, not just with the organizers of the event, but anything he said to anybody else.
There are so many sound bites of Lemon sounding like he's one of them, Mike. I mean, if they want to make that case, as they did in the J6 prosecutions, like he went well beyond journalism, it's not going to be hard. Steve, let's play, is it SOT 8? I know we converged 8 and I think 9 or 10, but let's play that one, SOT 8.
This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street, you start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution. When you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And if you remember what the civil rights movement was about, the civil rights movement was about these very kinds of protests. And for some reason, in our modern era, people think that in order to have protests, you got to be, cordoned off to a certain area and, what time you can protest. There's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what time you can protest. You can protest at any time. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt, it's to make uncomfortable. And that's what they're doing. And that's what I believe when I say everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to make people uncomfortable in these times. If you see how uncomfortably and how harsh people are being treated on the streets, you have to be willing to go into places and disrupt and make people uncomfortable. That is what this country is about.
Mike Davis, that soundbite could be played in the closing argument without much more. I mean, that should be how the prosecution ends its closing and then sits down.
Yeah, that watching that makes my blood boil. I went to 13 years of Catholic school. I'm a terrible Catholic, but I remember going to Catholic Mass, and I just can't imagine if the Mass were stormed like that by these agitators. And the Mass was stormed because I went to a white Catholic church, and that's exactly why they did this. They stormed the church because it was a white Christian church. This is textbook Facebook act violation and textbook.
And just to interject, he said that on that podcast with the angry Jennifer lady, that this isn't how I practice Christianity, but these are white supremacists in this church, and he thinks that's why they support this ICE pastor. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, and I'm going to pick up what Bill just said about how the DOJ may have given some forbearance here as a journalist. If the guy went in there and realized, okay, we made a mistake here, we should not have gone in here, but instead Don Lemon went out there sanctimoniously and doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down. They had to arrest him. They had to arrest him to not only punish him, but to deter others who think it is acceptable to storm a place of worship during the service. Just imagine if this were a mosque or a black church or a Jewish synagogue. I would be outraged. And it's just because these are white Christians that these Democrats think it's open season. I would say this to Don Lemon. Don Lemon can go to hell, but in the meantime, Pam Bondi is going to put him in prison.
Here's that soundbite of him on the podcast the Monday after he did this, which is 24 hours later.
I think that there is obviously there's racism in it. The whole point of it is that they're detaining people on the streets because of accents and the color of their skin, and they're also targeting people of color and black people as well as brown people. So there is a certain degree of racism there, and there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy, and they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic.
On top of that, Bill, here he is on camera, his own, confronting the pastor of the church in the middle of the disruption. Here it is.
Our church had gathered for worship, which we do every Sunday, and we were interrupted by this group of protesters. Yeah. We asked them to leave, and they obviously have not left. Yeah.
So. What do you think of this?
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yes. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
I mean, Bill, it's right there. Black and white. Leave. Get out. Then he tries to do but right to protest, right to right. And the pastor's right on. He keeps bringing it back to, we have a right to worship. We are trying to worship. We have rights too. Says specifically, I want them out and I want you out. And Don Lemon doesn't. He doesn't leave. He stays after that. I mean, like, that's a trespass case, but it's all over the place. He's justifying the actions of the protesters. He's refusing to leave when told to. He knows the rest are there illegally, and he's justifying every single outrageous thing that they've done because allegedly First Amendment.
Well, the Constitution guarantees the free exercise of religion in the same First Amendment. So there's absolutely no basis for Don Lemon to claim that his First Amendment, right as a member of the press is somehow superior to the First Amendment rights of all those people inside to freely exercise their religion. And frankly, I think the prosecutor or the pastor would have been perfectly within his rights to shove Don Lemon out of the church. It's a bit of self-help, but there would have been nothing wrong with that in my view. And Don Lemon's not there as a member of the press. I mean, we all know that. He might as well be a videographer for the group. He was capturing what they did for their benefit. Very interesting comment you made back before we started the discussion, mentioning his finances. Him pitching for people to join his YouTube channel as a subscriber and to help support their independent journalism. That opens up all the finances of his enterprise to not just discovery efforts, but it's all relevant now in the trial. Why was he there? Was he there
exactly
for First Amendment, or was he there for the financial well-being of his organization, trying to build it and promote it? And this was just a content opportunity. That's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Something else I want to mention, if you indulge me just a second. I believe this church is actually in St. Paul, not in Minneapolis. And I've done some digging. Yeah. There are different federal courthouses in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and they're in different counties. Now, as I don't think it's news to anybody here that jury pools for federal court are drawn not just from the city where the event happens, but they're drawn from the federal district and the division within the federal district where the charges are filed. I expect what we're going to see today is an indictment not out of Minneapolis, not out of the U.S. Attorney. Well, it'll be out of the District of Minnesota, but it won't be filed in the Minneapolis courthouse. It'll be filed in the St. Paul courthouse. And the jury pool for that will come from not just St. Paul, but all of the counties in Minnesota that are within that division of the District of Minnesota. Don Lemon's jury pool is going to consist of a lot of people just like the people trying to worship in that church.
Mm-hmm. This isn't a Washington, D.C. situation that Pam Bondi has walked into.
It's not a Minneapolis situation. The demographics of Minneapolis and St. Paul, my understanding is they're quite different. You know, St. Paul is not a conservative bastion by any stretch of the imagination, but it is not Minneapolis. You didn't see them rioting and burning down buildings after George Floyd in St. Paul.
Good point. You know, Mike, they're already trying to say over on CNN, which was hysterical this morning and so replete with misinformation. Nobody over there knows the law, honestly. Like Ellie Honig is the only guy who even makes an effort at being fair and actually sticking to the facts. He's a former federal prosecutor, but they didn't have him on this morning. In any event, they are saying that he's doing this. Trump is doing this because Don Lemon is a critic, because Don's been critical of President Trump. Meanwhile, they arrested another woman there who styled herself as a, quote, journalist. Her name is Georgia Fort. She used to be a news anchor in Duluth, Minnesota, and in Columbus, Georgia, and now has her own independent, I guess, media company called Black Press. And she was arrested too, and as were several others. So it isn't just about Don Lemon or critics of President Trump. They went after the ringleaders who were there and anybody else who they could identify. And they're still working, to my understanding is, on identifying all the people who participated in this. It has nothing to do with Don Lemon's politics, but that's where they're going to go with it. And here's what I wanted to ask you. I told the audience that originally the magistrate judge, who was conflicted and wouldn't say that there was probable cause for this case, he kicked it out and said, either improve your probable cause or go to a grand jury. So they tried to overrule him, our DOJ did, by going to his boss, basically the chief district judge. And that guy said, what are you doing here? I agree with that other guy's remedy. Go improve your probable cause affidavit or go to a grand jury. I'm not getting involved. And then they tried to go above him to the 8th Circuit. And the 8th Circuit said, what are you doing here? You're premature here. We don't take these cases on appeal until they're all done. Get out. So they went to a grand jury and got the indictment. But that chief judge wrote a letter. And in his letter, he did say go to a grand jury, but he also said, I see no evidence to support a case against Don Lemon. And that's all over X this morning. All these journalists are like, there's no evidence. 2 judges said that. The magistrate judge wouldn't do it. The district judge said there's no evidence. And now this morning, just FYI, reports just in that the Minnesota Attorney General, Keith Ellison, who went on Don Lemon's podcast within 24 hours of this event, saying you didn't do anything wrong, is now saying the same via paper statement. And on top of that, we are now told that a group of journalists have gathered outside of the federal courthouse in downtown LA, where Don Lemon is expected to be booked. An anti-ICE protest is expected to be held near this afternoon. So we're going to hear all about that judge's conclusion and the magistrate judge not finding PC. To begin with, your thoughts on those angles.
Well, that's great. But guess what? The federal grand jury found probable cause, because that's how you get an indictment, right? So you can either get an indictment under felony charges under Rule 7 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. You can also get a grand jury indictment for misdemeanors, right? That the right to a grand jury indictment belongs to the defendant, so that's why you have to do it for felonies. But the government can certainly go do it for a misdemeanor, like under the FACE Act, and they apparently did, and the grand jury agreed that there was probable cause. I don't think that anyone who watched the videos of your show today, Megyn, can say that there's not probable cause to move forward with FACE Act and Klan Act charges against Don Lemon and his fellow Klansmen, right? So there's no question there's probable cause, and it doesn't matter what these activist judges in Minnesota, hand-selected by Democrat senators. It doesn't matter what they think about this. The grand jury has already said that there is probable cause to move forward.
because people need to know that even though federal district judge may be appointed, if the opening is there under a Republican administration, yes, the president can nominate the judge, but they have to be, Mike's saying, but the Democratic senators, if it's from a blue state like Minnesota, you can nominate all you want. You could nominate a Mike Davis, but he's never going to get through because the two blue state senators are going to say, oh, hell no. So even under a Republican administration in the blue states, we wind up getting soft Republican or conservative judges during administrations that are held by, a Republican, like the Bush administration. I think this chief judge is a Bush administration appointee. But your point is you can't go with that, because in a state like Minnesota, he would have had to be blessed by the Democrat senators. A new year means new financial goals, like making sure your savings are secure and diversified. Will this be the year you decide to talk to someone from Birch Gold Group? They use an educational approach with a deep understanding of macroeconomics. There are forces pushing the dollar lower and gold higher, which is why they believe every American should own physical gold. So until January 30th, if you're a first-time gold buyer, Birch Gold is offering a rebate of up to $10,000 on qualifying purchases. To claim eligibility and start the process, just text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and you are still eligible for a rebate of up to $10,000. Consider making right now your first time to buy gold and take advantage of a rebate up to $10,000 when you buy by January 30th. Text MK to the number 989898. Claim your eligibility today. Again, just text MK to the number 989898. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.